The Chinese Civil War was not a sudden eruption of violence, but the culmination of decades of political, social, and ideological struggles that began with the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1911, when over 2,000 years of imperial rule collapsed, and a fragile Republic of China was declared under Sun Yat-sen, whose Kuomintang, or Nationalist Party, aspired to unify a fragmented nation that was plagued by regional warlords, foreign imperialist influence, and deep social inequality. Sun's vision of a modern China inspired many, but the Republic was weak, unstable, and constantly undermined by factionalism and external pressures. And by the early 1920s, the political landscape was complicated further by the emergence of the Chinese Communist Party, founded in 1921 under the influence of Marxist ideology and with support from the Soviet Union, leading to the First United Front in 1923. A temporary alliance between the KMT and CCP aimed at defeating warlords and unifying China through the Northern Expedition of 1926, which achieved notable successes under the leadership of Chiang Kai-shek, who after Sun's death in 1925 assumed control of the nationalist movement and began consolidating power in Nanjing. But tensions soon surfaced between the communists, who emphasized land reform, worker empowerment, and peasant mobilization, and the nationalists, who leaned toward authoritarian nationalism and feared communist influence in urban centers. The alliance collapsed in 1927 with the brutal Shanghai Massacre, when Chiang ordered a purge of communists, killing thousands and forcing survivors into the countryside, where under Mao Zedong and Zhu Dai, the communists began to rethink strategy by shifting focus from urban workers to rural peasants, creating the Jiangxi Soviet in southeastern China, experimenting with radical land reforms, and winning loyalty among poor farmers. While Chiang's Kuomintang established the Nanjing Decade from 1927 to 1937, a period of relative stability, modernization, and international recognition, yet plagued by corruption, authoritarianism, economic problems, and the continuing menace of regional warlords who resisted centralized rule. During this period, the nationalists attempted multiple encirclement campaigns to destroy the communists in Qing, and while the early campaigns failed due to poor coordination and effective communist guerrilla tactics, the fifth campaign of 1934, marked by blockhouse strategies and overwhelming force, succeeded in forcing the communists into retreat, leading to the legendary Long March of 1934-1935, a grueling trek of thousands of miles across harsh terrain in which tens of thousands perished, but which elevated Mao Zedong to undisputed leadership and became a foundational myth of communist endurance, sacrifice, and revolutionary spirit, shaping the CCP's identity forever. Yet as both sides prepared for renewed struggle, the Japanese invasion in 1937 altered the dynamics completely, with the Marco Polo Bridge incident triggering full-scale war, forcing the KMT and CCP into a fragile second united front against the external aggressor. But despite this nominal alliance, distrust remained high. And while the KMT bore the brunt of conventional battles, losing major cities like Shanghai and Nanjing, where the horrific Nanjing Massacre saw over 200,000 civilians and prisoners massacred by Japanese troops, the communists exploited the chaos to expand guerrilla operations behind enemy lines, reorganizing their forces as the 8th Route Army and New 4th Army, embedding themselves in rural northern China, and steadily growing influence by practicing disciplined conduct, promoting land reforms, and presenting themselves as true defenders of the Chinese nation. The KMT, operating from its wartime capital in Chongqing, suffered corruption, inflation, and declining morale, while the CCP gained credibility and popular support, particularly after Mao formulated the theory of protracted people's war, emphasizing endurance, mass mobilization, and gradual weakening of the enemy. And by the time Japan surrendered in 1945, China was devastated, with millions dead, cities destroyed, and the economy in ruins, yet the CCP emerged stronger, controlling vast rural areas and commanding millions of loyal peasants, while the KMT, though internationally recognized, was weakened by mismanagement, corruption, and loss of popular legitimacy, and as soon as the common enemy was gone, the fragile truce collapsed, leading to the resumption of civil war in 1946, despite American mediation efforts. Initially, the KMT launched major offensives, capturing communist bases in northern China with superior numbers and American-supplied equipment. But communist resilience, strategic retreats, and eventual shift to conventional warfare under commanders like Lin Bo allowed the People's Liberation Army to counterattack effectively. And from 1947 onward, momentum swung decisively as morale in KMT ranks crumbled due to corruption, inflation, and widespread desertions. While peasants increasingly supported the CCP due to promises of land redistribution and social justice, culminating in the three decisive campaigns of 1948-1949, the Liaoshen Campaign in Manchuria, Weihai Campaign in central China, and the Pinjin Campaign around Beijing, which annihilated the KMT's best forces, cost hundreds of thousands of casualties, and demonstrated the PLA's superior organization, strategy, and popular support. By early 1949, communist forces had encircled key cities. Entire KMT armies surrendered or defected, and Chiang Kai-shek retreated south before fleeing to Taiwan. While on October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong stood at Tiananmen Square in Beijing and proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China, declaring the triumph of the Communist Revolution, yet the war's consequences extended far beyond the battlefield. For domestically, it marked the unification of China under a centralized communist regime that immediately launched sweeping land reforms, nationalized industries, suppressed opposition, and began reshaping society under socialist ideology, while millions who had lived through decades of war, famine, and dislocation now faced a new political order promising stability and equality, though often delivered through harsh authoritarian measures. Internationally, the war reshaped global geopolitics as the communist victory in China was hailed as a monumental triumph for Marxism in the context of the emerging Cold War, alarming the United States, which had invested heavily in supporting in the fun is the communist victory in China was helped as a monumental triumph for Marxism. In the context of the emerging/wall, alarming the United States would have made a wade, and who had won the way, so and was the wall as well. The KMT, in leading to decades of non-recognition of the PRC, while the Soviet Union initially celebrated China as a socialist ally, though ideological and strategic tensions would later lead to the Sino-Soviet split. In Taiwan, where Chiang established the Republic of China government, became a flashpoint of East Asian politics. Supported by the U.S. and continuing to claim legitimacy over all of China, a dispute that persists today. The war's legacy lies also in its immense human cost, as millions perished in battle. Massacres or famine, and entire regions were devastated, yet from the ashes of war, a new China emerged. Unified for the first time in modern history, determined to pursue independence from foreign domination and internal fragmentation, and propelled onto a path that would, over the following decades, transform it into one of the world's major powers. The Chinese Civil War, therefore, is not only a domestic struggle between two parties, but a conflict that shaped the trajectory of modern China, influenced global Cold War politics, and continues to cast a shadow over international relations. Through the unresolved Taiwan issue, while at the same time serving as a defining chapter in the creation of the People's Republic of China and the shaping of the Chinese national identity, making it a conflict whose significance remains vital. In understanding both 20th century history and contemporary geopolitics,